Welcome to the third video in our series on ballistic movements in sports and martial arts. So far, we've gone through and looked at different sports, including combat sports and ballistic patterns related to throwing and striking, and seeing how they compare across each other. And we've identified a few consistent patterns. In video 2, we looked at some more unique movement patterns that we see in Chinese martial arts and internal martial arts regarding opening and closing. Now we're going to move on to the third video, going over another unique movement pattern, which I'm going to call compress and expand, or shrinking and growing. And the movement pattern we're going to look at in this video is from Tai Xing Yi. So when we look at this movement, there's two distinct positions. One is the lowered or squatting position, and one is the standing. If we look at each of these with respect to each other and looking at the angles of the joints, the ankles, knees, hips, and then neck with respect to the shoulders, we see very similar angles. From the widest difference being mostly in the hips, roughly maybe degrees or so. Going to the standing position, they're virtually identical, but in general you see a upright standing position amongst all of them, and very little difference in the joint angles. If we care, have overlapped all of them doing the movement over top of each other. We see basically what we saw looking at the joint angles. There are some practitioners would have a more extreme torso flexion. One has a more forward head position, but in general they follow the same pattern. The differences are slight. Looking at the forces in the movement, I think a concept from animation that fits really well is this idea of squish and stretch. And so in the squatted position, we see a squish along the front and a stretch along the back. Going up to the standing position, we see the reverse, a squish along the back and a stretch along the front. Here's another depiction of the forces involved in this movement with a little bit of artistic liberties. The red shows the contracted sides and forces, and the blue shows the stretch forces. And you see how the stretch and contract kind of interweave with each other. Where the uniqueness of this movement lies is that the stretch and snap that you see in throwing, punching, swinging via the preloading twist is now occurring along the vertical plane. So stretching along the back is the preloading, and then releasing that tension. This is very much like a bow storing energy. When the string is pulled, the bow bends and then bends back to its original position upon release. We'll go ahead and examine the position in detail. So we see, starting from the head going down, the neck is an extension, the torso is in flexion, the shoulders are in external rotation, and hands are supinated. We see some hip flexion. It's mostly a posterior pelvic tilt. Knees are in flexion, and ankles are dorsiflexed in the squatted position. Looking at the muscles in the neck, we have the trapezius, where it connects to the back of the skull, the scalenus medius, the hyoid muscles, and the sternocleidomastoid muscle. Moving on to the shoulder, we have the teres minor and the infraspinatus, rotating the shoulders outward. And then we have the rhomboids being stretched, and the serratus anterior pulling the scapula forwards. Helping also to bring those shoulders forward is the pectoralis minor. And then when moving down to the hip and getting that posterior pelvic tilt, we have a contribution of the rectus abdominis, the external obliques, and the glutes to help bring that back of the hip
downward. Moving on to the back, most notably, you'll see a stretch in the lats, the latissimus dorsi, and then you'll notice that the thoracolumbar fascia is stretched as the glutes are pulling down, the external abdominals and the adductors are pulling in, getting that caved in torso, and the lats are stretched, wrapping around the body.
Looking at the fascial sheets, we have the erectus sheath in the front, which is contracted in the squatted position, and the thoracolumbar fascia and the serratorhomboid fascia being stretched along the back, as mentioned before. Using the Anatomy Trains by Robert Schleip model to look at these movements, we see a number of lines involved. We have the front line, the back line, the deep back arm line, and the front arm line, and then the deep front line as well. So in the squatted position, we see contraction along the front lines and a stretch along the back lines, including the arms, and then vice versa.